Hi, I'm Jessica Beha, and I'm one of the prevention education specialists with Great Rivers Regional System for Addiction Care. And I'm here with Rachel, and Rachel is going to be telling her story today. She is willingly telling our story, and it's going to be part of our This Is My Story series. And so, Rachel, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Like she said, I'm Rachel Thaxton, and I guess I'm excited to do this. This is a weird format for me. I've told my stories in a lot of different places, but this is a new one for me. So bear with me, everybody, as I adjust. I've never done a Facebook Live or recorded myself talking, so this is definitely something different. I'll try not to go for too long, but she says I have an unlimited time slot, so y'all strap in. I'll start at the beginning only because there's things that happened to me in my childhood that I think are relevant and important for the rest of the story, and a big reason for why I ended up where I did. So I'll start there and just say that, like a lot of people who suffer from a substance use disorder, from a very early age, I felt different than everyone else. On the inside, I felt very different. I felt isolated, and I felt like no one understood me. Even at the age of 5, I was very self-conscious and thought about myself a lot. And I think people do that naturally, but for me, that's all I thought about, and I worried about what people thought about me all the time. Usually kids that I talk to now, when I speak to them, it's like they don't care what you think about what they say. I mean, my daughter says things I would never say out loud, but as a 5-year-old or 6-year-old the same age as her, I was very guarded and just didn't really know how to handle myself in public. And so from an early age, I didn't have great coping skills, and I didn't talk a lot, which is going to be surprising as you listen to me, because I talk a lot now. But when I was in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher told my parents that they were worried about me because I never spoke in class, and that was because I was worried about what they thought. I was worried I'd be wrong and embarrass myself. I cared a lot about other people's judgment of me, and that theme kind of ran my entire life until I finally found recovery. But I had a pretty normal childhood other than that. I had good parents. My dad worked, my mom stayed home, so I got lots of attention from my mom, and I was a huge daddy's girl. I have a younger brother who is also one of us and in recovery for several years now, which is a blessing. But a few things happened as I grew older that I think had a profound effect on me because of my lack of coping skills. My parents got divorced when I was, and the ages are still hard for me to wrap my head around. I was about 13 when my dad told me he was leaving my mom. So that was a really, really big deal for me because I was a daddy's girl and he was leaving. And really that's all I heard about in that equation was my dad was leaving and I was going to be staying with my mom. And even though he just moved into town away from us, it still felt like he was disconnected from our family. I wasn't seeing him every day, and he was a pillar in my life, and suddenly he wasn't there anymore. So my brother and I stayed with my mom, and she started having some issues when he left. And I still don't know whether he left because of the issues or she started having them after he left. And it's not something that he can really remember either. He just knows that they just weren't in love anymore. But after he left, my mom started acting strange. She had always been really strict. My parents kept me in a pretty tight bubble growing up, very strict. It was follow the rules, do what they say, or else. And I didn't step out of line very much. And so when my mom started acting weird, it was really apparent to me. I mean, she never drank. She never went out with friends. She was always there. And all of a sudden she was drinking more and she was gone a lot. And then I remember one night I had friends over to stay the night, and we had started getting into some things like alcohol, and we were sneaking out for the night because we were going to go drink with our friends. I mean, this is at an early age. This is at 13, so I started drinking pretty early. But I went to go look for my mom, to make sure she was asleep so that I could sneak out, and she was gone. So she had snuck out um, while I was in my room. Things like that started happening, and I knew that it wasn't right. And I started drinking more often because I didn't really have a whole lot of parental supervision. And finally, I talked to my dad. I called him and told him what was going on, because I knew something was wrong with my mom, one, and two, that I was starting to get a little bit out of control. And I needed something more stable in my life. And that's a pretty grown-up decision to have to make at such an early age. I think I was 14 when I made that phone call. And then we found out shortly after that my mom had started smoking crack. So I found that out when it was in the newspapers in our hometown. They had found her and arrested her up the street from our house. They found her with a crack pipe, and it was in the newspapers. And that's kind of how I found out about what was really going on, because they were still trying to keep me shielded from something like that. And after that, I really didn't see my mom for many, many years. They sold the house. She went into several treatments, and over the years just didn't come around anymore. I'm sure it's because she was embarrassed, and she had a late onset substance use disorder. So hers manifested very late in life. She had bipolar disorder, and I believe she was trying to treat that with drugs and alcohol, and it just got out of control because she didn't know how else to handle it. So when her bipolar disorder really started to take hold, that's what she turned to, and it took her many, many years to dig her way out of that. She's good now. We have a good relationship now, but I didn't see her for a long time. I was really mad. And I spent a lot of my time saying, I'm not going to be like my mom. I will never be like her. And, it's just crazy to me when I look back on that, because I was just like her. No matter what I said, I was just like her. So I wish I would have learned more from her before I judged her so harshly, but sometimes that's what it takes. So we have a good relationship now, but I probably did not start seeing my mom again until after I got out of college. So it was a long road for her. So just from there, my dad was around. I was living with him, but my life still progressed. I was a party girl all through high school. I would drink as often as I could, smoke pot as often as I could, and all through high school I experimented with anything that anybody brought around. Everybody knows the normal things. I experimented with pills and acid and ecstasy, all that stuff. Nothing really took hold for me early on. I did well in school. That was something that I was always able to do. I was always really good in school, made straight A's. Almost every year I was in school. I graduated with honors from St. Albans High School with a weighted GPA of 4.25. So I didn't struggle in that area, no matter how much I drank or used or partied or got in trouble, which I did a lot with my parents. So I graduated high school, and I ended up going to WVU, which was very appealing to me because I like to drink a lot. And I know what you're thinking, but I actually did well at WVU, and I still look back on that time of my life as the absolute best time of my life. A time when I had the most fun and was able to kind of let loose, and I didn't know a whole lot of people, so I felt like I could be a different person, made new friends, and still have those friends today. And I graduated with a master's degree from WVU in 2007. My degree was in elementary education. I had a specialty in early education, so I wanted to teach young kids, and that's what I did. I left Morgantown and I moved back home in 2007, and I started to teach as a substitute teacher, and then I started teaching as a full-time kindergarten teacher at a school on the west side of Charleston, which I absolutely loved. Those kids are amazing. I enjoyed working in a challenging environment, which is what it was, and I grew to like love those kids like my own. But something else that holds true for me throughout my whole story is that I'm always in some kind of toxic relationship. All through high school, I was in toxic relationships. College, I actually was with a nice guy, but I guess I got bored. I was with him the entire time I was in college for 5 years, and got bored. I don't know, he was too nice. And so I dumped him and started going out with someone else and got into a really toxic relationship. And we moved in together when I came home. And when we broke up, because we were drinking and doing coke all the time, and he was a bartender, so I'm sure you can imagine how that went. When we broke up, I was so upset, and I say that a little sarcastically because I used my emotional pain as an excuse to start taking painkillers on a regular basis, which I'd obviously experimented with before and never really had a problem with them. Never really especially liked them or didn't like them. I just knew they were painkillers, and it was something to do to take my mind off of a breakup. So I started doing those pretty regularly and, working. And then I didn't meet. I hooked back up, I guess, with a guy that I had gone to high school with. We graduated high school together, and he reached out to me, and we hung out, and we had been friends before anyways. And it turns out we like to do the same things, and that was drink and take pain pills and party. And we got together, and it just from there progressed rapidly for us. So I still say that I had a late onset of my substance use disorder too. I don't think that it wasn't there before. I think it was there the whole time, but until I started really, till I found the drug of choice for me, something that I loved, it didn't really take hold. But I started treating what I now know as a mental issue or an emotional issue with painkillers. And so when I got with him, we were doing Lortabs, which is pretty low-end pain pill, not real powerful. And we did those on the weekends, and then it started becoming like every other day, and then it was twice a day, and it just got to a point where we were spending every last dollar we had on those, and we were having to buy more and more to get the same effect. And Lortabs really weren't doing the trick anymore. But I will say this, I really didn't think there was anything wrong with what we were doing. I knew that we shouldn't be taking them as much as we had been, but they were a pill that had been prescribed to people, and I really didn't think it was going to be something that I got hooked on like I did. I did not know it would take a hold of my life like it did. I was really naive, and even though I'd sat in the health classes and I'd heard that don't do drugs, when we talked about drugs in health classes, we talked about pot or marijuana, we talked about heroin and cocaine and those types of things. Nobody ever, and when they talked about drugs with me, said these prescription pills will take over, will make you addicted, and then told me what would happen to me once I was addicted. I'm not blaming it on that. I know right from wrong, but I never knew that would happen. And the reason I say that is I can look back now, and I remember a day when I was getting my students on the bus after school, and I felt sick and really sick, and I called my boyfriend then and told him how I felt. I said, don't know what's wrong with me. I think maybe I have the flu. My legs hurt so bad. I'm hot and cold. I'm like sweating. I'm shivering, and I just feel awful. I have no energy all day long. I felt like this, and he just said it. I mean, he said, "You're not sick. You're going through withdrawal," and that was shocking to me. I mean, I remember it vividly. I had no clue what that meant. I didn't know that could happen to me. But once that happened, once that started happening, there was no going back from there for me. And it didn't matter how many times I said I wasn't going to do it anymore. Um, Once that I started feeling like that, I would change my mind really, really quickly. We started having to get more powerful pills to create that same effect. So we just like a quick timeline. I mean, we went from Lortabs to Percocets to Roxycontin to Oxycontin, Panas really quickly, and it eventually progressed past that. I mean, we ended up. When I stopped using, I was doing heroin and meth, but just in the time that we were together before I ever went to treatment, we progressed past Opanas all the way to Oxycontin. Heroin really wasn't around back then, not at that time anyways. And we got married, and we had a child. During all this progression, I would love to say that when I got pregnant, that I stopped using, but I didn't, and that was the worst time of my life. I had wanted a child for my entire life. I always knew I was meant to be a mother and love children. I mean, why else do you go into teaching 5-year-olds? I love children, and I'd always babysat when I was younger. I taught swim lessons. I mean, I spent all my time with kids as much as possible, and that was the one thing I'd always wanted to be. And when I got pregnant, I was using and I could not stop. And so for 10 months, 40 weeks, I was miserable. I mean, so happy that I was going to have a child and excited to meet that child, but also I hated myself for that entire time. And I was terrified of what I was doing to my child. And I was terrified for anyone to find out because I was so ashamed of myself. And so I had my son in January of 2011, and God must have been watching over him because he was a perfect child. And once he was born, a lot of things changed. We got worse, and I quickly figured out that I wasn't able to be a mother while I was using, and I found that out pretty quickly, and I'm glad that I did, not because I don't want to be with my child, but because I've spared my child, I think, a lot of that pain and putting him in danger. When he was about 5 months old, and his dad finally went to treatment. And here's the thing, and people always think this is funny, is because I thought that his dad was the problem. So I made him go to treatment, and I thought once he left that I was going to be okay, But once he left, it just left me alone with my problem and a baby and all the issues that we had accumulated, like, our utilities being shut off and behind on rent and not having any groceries and our car almost breaking down. I mean, all those things, I still had all those problems. And it turns out that he wasn't my problem, that I was my problem. And I called my dad and I asked him if I could bring my son and I to his house. Just trying to get out of my house and be around somebody. I was probably trying to figure out a way to steal from him. Who knows? I was at that point where I was doing things that I never thought I would do. And my dad told me no. He said, no, and don't call me again. And I'm not going to be around you. I'm not going to be around the baby. I'm not going to do anything for you unless you get some help. And I was like in shock. I mean, I had tried to blame it all on my husband for so long. And, I didn't know I knew that my dad had an idea, but I mean, of course he knew. I mean, we had so many problems, and I was stealing from him and all kinds of things, uh, just bad things, lying, stealing, not having contact with him for several days or weeks, and then all of a sudden coming out of nowhere and needing money. And I had a salaried job, but never had any money. So it was pretty obvious I had a problem. And it didn't take me very long after he turned his back on me. I think I waited probably like an hour, and I called him back and I said, okay, what do I need to do? Like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, I'll get help, but where? And that was a big problem back in 2011, was there wasn't great access, and I had never tried to get help before, and nobody I knew had ever tried to get help really. My husband had gone to Pinecrest, which is a Prestera program in Huntington. And so I ended up going to Pinecrest and getting, or not Pinecrest, Prestera in Dunbar, and it did an intake with me and put me on a wait list. And said it'll be about 30 days before you can go. And I was like, okay. So I, just kept on. My dad was there for me while I waited, but I just kept on doing what I was doing. I think I actually started buying Suboxone just to make it through until I could get into some kind of treatment. I had to tell my principal, my boss at the time, I had to go into her office and tell her what I was doing, tell her I needed a leave of absence. And she was really understanding, and told me to go. So it was about 30 days later, I got a call and they told me to come in. And I went to treatment for the first time in 2011. I went to a short-term treatment, so I was there. I convinced them that I didn't need to stay the full 28 days. And I stayed for like 26 days, including detox, including the whole thing. I convinced them that I needed to get back to work and all these things. But I learned a lot while I was there. Remember that they told me that I have a disease. And I said, I don't understand what you're saying. And they told me, like, you're going to have this disease forever. For the rest of your life, you're going to have to work on this so that you don't use anymore. And I cried like a baby when they told me that. I mean, I was in a group with other women and they said that, and everybody's looking at me like, what is wrong with this chick? And I thought that was the worst thing that anyone had ever told me. You might as well just diagnose me with cancer. I mean, this is a disease I'm going to have the rest of my life. All I wanted to do was go to treatment and figure out how to moderate, and be able to use like I used to maybe in high school or before I've had a real problem. And now they're telling me that I can't drink or ever do a drug for the rest of my life. That was a huge part of my life for a long time, and I just couldn't believe it. It felt like somebody punched me in the face. So I cried and cried and tried to come to terms with that, and I learned a lot while I was there. And when I left, I moved in with my dad. They had moved me out of my house while I was in there for less than 30 days. They had found my husband in there, in the house while they were moving me out, shooting up. He had started using a needle. And that was something I swore I would never do too. And when I was in treatment, I spent a lot of time comparing myself to people. So I compared myself out. People would talk about their experience and I would think, oh, well, I'm not that bad. I still have my job I'm going back to, and I still have custody of my child, and I'm not using a needle, and I still have my car. And I really didn't have a low bottom at that time. And I really thought that made me, I don't know, better than other people. Not really better, but maybe I had a better chance at using again and getting away with it. Just stupid stuff. So I moved back in with my dad, and I moved in with my dad and not back in. I moved in with my dad and his girlfriend at the time. Actually, they were together, and had my son there and went back to work and all the things I was doing before. And then I was also trying to keep up with my personal recovery from what they had taught me. go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps, read, pray. You know, there's a million things they tell you. Get a home group, go to 90 and 90. Trying to do all that on top of raising a baby. So my baby was 6 months old. So not a lot of sleep happening. Getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going to teach, trying to be a responsible adult and do everything all at once. And my family was pushing it. Everybody was pushing me to do this stuff, and they didn't know any better, and neither did I. And I wasn't able to hold it together. It's actually the longest amount of time that I'd been sober since now. So it's the only, I had 87 days clean and sober. And that's the other longest amount of sobriety that I've ever had. So been to treatment 9 times. Obviously I didn't last after that 87 days. I got with a guy I was in treatment with. I'd left my husband because obviously he was shooting up and doing all these things, and he went to jail and came out, and he wasn't supporting my recovery. So I left him and started dating a guy I met in treatment, which was real cute. And shockingly enough, we started using together. And then all the things that I said I would never do, all those things I hadn't done yet, those things started happening really quickly. And that It Gets Worse, Never Better really started to make sense to me, because it hadn't before. So progressed really quickly, and I won't go through my whole treatment monologue about all the places I've been, and we'll just say that it got really, really bad. And I've been in short-term, long-term. I've been in women and children places. I've been in recovery residences, Oxford houses, you name it. I've probably tried it. I've done MAT. I've really gone to a lot of programs, and I'm not knocking any of the programs. All of the programs were fantastic. Just I was not ready to work the program of recovery, and I didn't want to stop. The consequences would get really great and be overwhelming, and I would go and things would start to get better, and I would start doing my own thing, or I would finish the program and come out and think I could do it again. I mean, it was just complete insanity, and things got really bad at the worst point in that time. I mean, me and that guy ended up living in a tent on a riverbank with absolutely nothing, living off of honey buns. I mean, we would figure out a way to steal or lie or cheat our way into getting money somehow and buying drugs. I would let a drug dealer from Detroit take my car, which I can't even believe I still had a car, but I did before I sold it for heroin. I would let him take it to Detroit just so he would give me free drugs. Did a lot of things that I said I would never do. Definitely started using a needle, all of those things, and it got really low. And I finally went to the healing place in Louisville, which I thought was going to be the answer to all of my problems. I mean, I really wanted to get help, and I went, and it was a great program, and I'd known a lot of people who had gone there, and I looked up to them when they came home, you know, like they had what I wanted. And that program changed me forever. I was there for 6 months, and I learned almost everything I learned about working a program. I learned while I was there. It's just I didn't do it. I didn't do it, and I left. Well, actually, I got kicked out. Say that. I got kicked out because I used a girl that I knew from Huntington, ended up coming there, and she approached me in the bathroom and handed me a pill, and I didn't even think. I didn't even blink. She handed me a pill, and I popped it in my mouth. I mean, I hadn't really started to work a program. I had no mental defense. And when she handed it to me, I just took it. I didn't even know what it was. It ended up being a Valium, and I passed out asleep in the hallway. while I was waiting to be let back in the dorm. We had to sit outside the hallway. So anyways, they knew. And because I used on property, they discharged me and made me ineligible for services for a year. And that was one of the worst feelings of my life because I absolutely loved it there. That was my family. That was my home. I begged them not to make me leave, and they did not give a shit. They put my stuff in trash bags and put me out the front door. And so I was in downtown Louisville with 2 trash bags full of stuff and nowhere to go. And I didn't know anybody who hadn't been in there. So I made it back home. I called my dad long story, called my dad from a payphone and went through a whole hell of a lot of shit to get on a bus and come back to Charleston. But with my trash bags, you just have not lived till you drug trash bags through downtown on the west end of Louisville. So I came home and thought I was done. That was like the worst thing I could have happened. Being homeless in a tent on a riverbank and finally going and being discharged, dragging trash bags, thought that was it. Went to an Oxford house because my dad was certainly not letting me come home, and started working at Pizza Hut. I lived in Dunbar, was going to the Serenity Club, really trying to do the right thing. And I met another guy, and oh my God, I can't stay away from him. I met another guy that I worked with at Pizza Hut, and that should have been the first thing, but it wasn't. And so we got together, and long story short, we started using, and then I got pregnant, and I ended up moving in with him because obviously I got kicked out of the Oxford house because I was using. And so I moved in with him not because I really wanted to live with him. No offense to Aaron, ever watched. No offense, Aaron. But because I had nowhere else to go, and he was the only person who would even talk to me, and regardless of how I felt, I mean, I was going to have to move. I was going to move in with him anyways. Had no other options. And then I got pregnant, and found out pretty quickly after I moved in with him that he was abusive. Not normally, but when he was high, he liked to do meth, and so he was abusive when he did meth. First, it was just kind of emotionally abusive and real controlling, and not letting me leave, hold me back, things like that. And then it started turning into like grabbing me by the throat and slamming me down. And I was pretty pregnant, and I wasn't using every day, but I was using enough to not be sick. I was just so tired. But he went out on a pretty good meth bender, and I was about 4 months pregnant, and I tried to leave him. Got in a big fight, and he was crazy in some kind of meth psychosis, and I tried to leave. And he ran at me, and I pushed him off, and I guess he took that as a threat, but ended up smacking me in the face. It's so hard at the time, that it took me down. And that was pretty much it for me. I'm not somebody who will take a whole lot of shit from a guy. We can fight, but no, we're not fist fighting. And I called my brother, I called my family, told them what was going on. My brother had been trying to get me to go and get help again anyways. And I told my brother, what the hell is the point? I'd gone to every kind of treatment there was. I'd talked to everybody that I'd been told to talk to. I'd done things. And I just really didn't think there was any hope for me. I knew what had happened to my mom, and we really hadn't had I didn't know much different about my mom. And I just really thought, I've tried everything. What the hell is the point now? And I'm pregnant. Like, I'm pretty much, I'm doomed. I hadn't seen my son. I had a CPS case. I mean, the whole nine, all the consequences were there. But once he hit me, I called my brother, and it wasn't about getting help, really. It was more about getting the hell away from him. And they put me up in a hotel for the night. My mom did, which is a little ironic. And I called a lady that I knew in Huntington. My brother said, call her. she had helped me get into the healing place. She had gone there, and he said, just call Lori, see what she says. I called her. She gave me the whole speech that we give to people who we're trying to help, and said, do you want to be better? And I said, of course, yeah, but I'm trying. She said, okay, well, I want you to come here. I don't have a bed right now, but I will in a couple of days. Just hang in there. So I thought, okay, she's not gonna have a bed for a couple of days. I ended up getting my taxes back like the next day. And I told her I hadn't used, and she had told me not to use, of course, and I got my taxes back. And of course, we all know what happens when we get our taxes. I got really, really high, and she called that day and was like, you need to come today. And I was like, oh no, I can't come today. I cannot come today. And I will come tomorrow. I have to go, I started go see my son. I need to get all my things in order. I had not a thing to get in order and was not allowed to see my son. I was just trying to put her off. I still had drugs left and I still had money. She was like, you're coming today. That's the end of the story. You're coming today. And I was like, okay. So my mom ended up taking me. She drove me to Huntington and dropped me off. And Lori said, when was the last time that you used? And I said, a week ago. And she said, okay. Yeah, I think she pretty well knew that I was lying. But anyways, I went there on July 23rd, 2013. So my sobriety date is July 24th, 2013. And I went to the Lifehouse in Huntington, and I thought for sure that they were crazy. You want me to go to a recovery house, and just get sober? I was like, I went to the most strict and locked down place that there is, and I couldn't get sober there, but you want me to go to the Lifehouse? Okay. I never in a million years thought that was going to work. But when I got there, I just was so tired, and I had nowhere else to go. And I was scared of that guy, and I definitely didn't want to go back to him, and that would have been my only choice. And I was pregnant, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with that child, but I definitely wanted to give it a chance. I was 5 months pregnant when I went. There was no option of not having the baby. I mean, it was too far along, and I didn't want to use the whole pregnancy again. I didn't want to do that to a child again. So I stayed and just did everything that they told me to do. I was not a happy person when I got there. I was pissed. I was mad about my life and myself and what I had done to everyone and my situation. And I was a complete total bitch. And everyone there was so happy. There were 17 women there. They were so happy. And they were running around joking and laughing and smiling and being nice to me. And I hated them. And I did not think anything was funny. And I didn't think they were cute. And didn't want them to be around me. And they were so nice. I mean, they would make me food. I didn't have anything. I didn't have food. I had a backpack with belongings like this. That was it. I had nothing. I mean, they would bring me food. They would let me use their toiletries. They would let me wear their clothes. I still didn't like them. Took me a long time before I started to loosen up a little bit and not take life so seriously. I mean, I'd been in a really serious situation. And I couldn't understand why they were so happy. But I stayed and I tried to listen to what they said. Lori told me to get a sponsor immediately, and I did. And I was desperate to feel different because I was so miserable. So when she said, let's start working the steps right now, I said, okay. She said, I promise you'll feel better if you work the steps. And I was like, I'm all for feeling better. And I did. And I gave it 100% of me because I really had nothing else to do. I had nothing else to do, nobody to talk to. I didn't like any of those girls. They were too happy. And so I really started to dig into some things, take a look at my life and what the real problem was. My brother was in Huntington and he was just so excited that I was there too. He had gone through the Healing Place of Huntington, which is now Recovery Point, and was a peer mentor there. So he was in phase 2. And so he was at all the meetings. He would go with me and introduce me to every single person there. And at first it was annoying. And then, I started making friends with the women. I did not mess with any men. And I won't say it's because I didn't want to. I'll say it was because I was pregnant. So that saved me from that part that had gotten me off track so many times. I didn't want anything to do really with any men, and they certainly didn't want anything to do with me. So that was actually worked out in my favor. God has a weird way of doing things and removing barriers for us. I started hanging out with women. I didn't have a car, walked everywhere. I mean, I really, I did everything for myself for the first time. I left my parents alone. They had had enough, and I'd had enough of using them up. Got a job at Walgreens. I didn't want to. I thought it was beneath me even then, after working at Pizza Hut and all that. But I got a job at Walgreens, and I worked there for like a year. And my only job there, I tell this to people all the time, I was like, I ran the register, but all I had to do really was say, hi, welcome to Walgreens when people would walk in. And I would mess that up because I swear I did not know how to hold a job. I didn't know how to follow directions. So I stayed at the Life House until my daughter was born, and I decided to keep my daughter. For a while, I thought about giving her up for adoption. I really wrestled with what was more selfish of me, to keep her or to let someone else have her, what would be best for her. And I worked on that with my sponsor and Lori and some other people I confided in. I just wanted to do what was right, and I ended up keeping her. And oh my God, I always cry at this part. She's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. She saved my life. I moved out of the Life House after I'd been there for 5 months because I was having her, and I moved into Project Hope in Huntington, which was part of a homeless shelter. And I continued to work a program. I went to work every day. I didn't do anything extravagant or crazy or weird. I did everything I was told to do. I went to meetings. I made friends with women who became my support group. Got a sponsor. I worked the steps to the best of my ability, gave it my all. I prayed a lot. Life House is a faith-based house, and I had no idea how to pray before. I was not raised in a religious home, and we never went to church, and no one ever prayed around me. So I learned how to do that while I was there, which was a huge deal for me. And I started to really believe in faith and action. And that's what I did. I made it through a lot of really hard things because I believed that God had a plan for me. And whatever it was, he wasn't going to bring me through all this crap to put me in harm's way now. And even if I felt like it was harm's way, I knew there would be a reason. I would see that later. And so I just kept moving forward no matter what obstacles were put in my way. My daughter was born in December of 2013, and I was terrified. I'd already messed up once, but she was born, and I took off work, and I spent 100% of my time with her for almost 4 months. And I was happy as I've ever been. We were alone, and all I did was talk to her, and we went to meetings and things like that still, but I grew really close to my daughter and got to have that with her, which I didn't get to have with my son. And I didn't know if I would ever have that connection with my son. That kind of freaked me out. But I started to see him. I had waited quite a while because I wanted to make sure that I had my feet under me before I did this all again. I wasn't going to get him involved and then mess up again. I'd done that too many times. This was really the first time I started thinking about other people other than myself in my recovery, and I think that made a difference. So after Emma was born, I started seeing my son. I would see him on the weekends. First it was just visits, and then he would stay overnight. And then his dad, who had been keeping him, even though they lived at his mom's house, he had been with his dad there. His dad decided he was going to go to treatment. He was going to go to the healing place in Huntington. And so I was able to kind of leverage that so that I could get my son Monday through Friday. And then he would go back on Saturdays and Sundays to be with his dad on the weekend at his mom's house. And that was when my son started staying with me, and I was able to start building that relationship with him. He was 3 years old at the time. And, you know, now I have 50 custody of him with his dad. Recently, I was granted full custody for other reasons, but I won't go into all that right now. It's not my story to tell, but, you know, it's a miracle that happened. And I have that connection with him now. We're so close. He's a sweet, sweet boy. Just such a good boy, smart and funny and athletic and very good to his mommy. And he does not remember that I was gone. He was so young, and I'm really, really thankful for that. When I ask him about things about when I was gone, he doesn't remember. So, you know, he went to stay with his grandmas when he was probably 5. And he said, "What am I going to do without you, Mommy? I like to sleep with you." I said, "Well, don't you remember when you used to sleep with Mama all the time?" And he said he didn't remember. So, you know, that is pretty amazing. Obviously, I'll tell him about what happened when he gets older because I want him to know. But I have really great children. He's 9 now, and my daughter is 6. So we've had a pretty awesome time. There have obviously been a lot of things. Nothing is perfect. I've gone through a lot of struggles. I've been married and divorced again. Another toxic relationship. I've had struggles with my kids' fathers and trying to get them help and see my children suffer because of it, and family issues. I mean, lots of things have come up, but my life has been fantastic, and I've gained those skills that I need to handle those things now, so I don't have to ever drink or use over them. My stepmom said, like last week, she's like, "If you get through this quarantine thing without using, I'm really going to start thinking that you might not." And I was like, "Don't say that." You know, but she's like, "I cannot believe all the things that you have endured." And I mean, there really have been a lot, but life is so awesome. And I've put in a lot of work. You know, I've never stopped. I've talked to my sponsor. She might listen to this, so I'll be honest. I've talked to my sponsor several times a week, sometimes every day. It depends on what's going on in my life. Sometimes I go too long without calling her, but I always have that relationship with her where I can call her at any time, and she can tell when something's going on with me, which is pretty cool. I've had the same sponsor for a little over 2 years. I've had a few work the steps several times, always working the steps. I just finished step 12 again. I don't ever stop. My sponsor says that every time I work the steps, I get a little bit more free, find out more things about myself, and get to deal with the things that have happened since the last time. I have an awesome support group. Stay with women who are in recovery. Talk to them every day. Have a great support group. My parents, I would count in that support group. They live down the street from me. So I've never stopped. I still pray every day. And I haven't done anything perfectly, that's for sure, but I've never given up. There have been times when I've gone through dark periods and I haven't done a whole lot for my recovery, but I always knew where to turn. And I have more self-awareness now, so I can see it in myself when I'm starting to feel a certain type of way. You know, I just bought my own house for the first time, which is pretty amazing. It took me 6 years to get my credit in a place where I could buy a house, but I was patient and I tried to wait until I was really ready, and just bought my own house in October. Have both my children. They're healthy and happy, and I get to help them with their schoolwork, so I get to use my education degree that I paid $40,000 for. I worked at Recovery Point for several years, which was like the coolest experience of my life. When I applied for that job, I'd worked at Walgreens for a year, and then I'd worked at a nonprofit in Huntington in homeless services while I was living in a homeless shelter with my daughter at Project Hope, which is just crazy. And they told me I should apply for the job as program director for the Charleston Recovery Point for women. It was the first one of its kind in West Virginia. I was like, there's no way I'm getting that, you know. Always had a really big passion for women in recovery and was very vocal about it once I started getting my feet under me in recovery, because I went through a lot of crap getting everything back. I walked everywhere. I was pregnant. I had to find doctors. I had to, figure out how to get a driver's license and birth certificates. I mean, there's so many things that little things that you have to do and resources. But I got that job and I worked for Recovery Point. We opened that women's program in 2017, raised a lot of money and was successful at it, which is always great. But again, really hard work, and I cared about what I was doing. And women are there now. Their lives are being saved, and that's something I can look at and be proud of. I don't work there anymore. I worked for Recovery Point for 4 years. And then I was offered a position at the state level in the Office of Drug Control Policy under Director Bob Hansen. And I love Bob. He's got a heart for this, and he's so good at what he does. And when he offers you a job, you just don't turn it down. He's the one who offered me the job at Recovery Point and at the Harmony House before that. So I decided I'd go and work for Bob again. And I've been there for a little over a year. And it's like surreal to me. I mean, I lived in a tent and ate honey buns every day. And my only friend was my boyfriend and a Detroit drug dealer. And now I get to talk to legislators and be in the governor's office. And I met the president of the United States. And, these things, it's just, I never could have dreamed my life would be like this. So if you're watching this, if you've actually hung in there for the full, I don't know how long I've been talking, don't give up. Recovery is possible. And if you need anything, anybody is welcome to reach out to me.
Awesome. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. You can also see Rachel's story in the Kanawha County Prescription Opioid and Heroin Awareness Toolkit. It's a very small snippet of that, but you can also check that out. You can actually find that on the Great Rivers website. It's at marshallhealth.org/Great Rivers. And like Rachel said, if you're interested in getting in contact with her, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you can't get a hold of her, you can get a hold of us at Great Rivers, and we can definitely put you in contact with Rachel. Rachel, we want to thank you again for sharing your story. Very, very touching and such great hope, really and truly. Just a lot of hope in that. And so, again, we just want to thank you so much for being willing to share your story with everyone.
Thank you.
Be on the lookout for more stories of hope and recovery. And if you know someone who would be willing to share their story, then please have them contact us at Great Rivers. Thanks, guys, for watching.